that rather fancy and expensive graphic suggests it's time for the big question, in which we tackle a major news story of the day. And tonight, the basis of our debate in the big question is the subject of my big opinion monologue, which you can catch now on Twitter at GBNews. Given that he's trailing in the polls and given that we are in the midst of a major economic crisis, with the Bank of England predicting a year-long recession and 13% inflation, should Rishi Sunak now concede the Tory leadership contest in the national interest so that we can install Liz Truss as Prime Minister immediately? I personally would like her in number 10, as I've said, by Friday. Sunak's campaign wasn't going brilliantly anyway before any of this. This happened. Take a look.
I managed to start changing the funding formulas to make sure that areas like this are getting the funding that they deserve. Because we inherited a bunch of formulas from the Labour Party that shoved all the funding into deprived urban areas, then that needed to be undone. I started the work of undoing that.
I would humbly suggest that video was the nail in the coffin. Well, to debate this, should Rishi Sunak concede the leadership contest, I'm delighted to welcome Boris Johnson's biographer, Tom Bower. Of course, he's got an amazing new book out about Meghan Markle, which is an instant bestseller and a cracking read. Also, ex-UKIP MEP, broadcaster and writer Godfrey Bloom, and politics legend, former Conservative minister and shadow Home Secretary Anne Widdecombe. Anne, I've got to start with you. Should Rishi Sunak concede the race in the national interest?
No, I don't think so. There are several reasons for that. First of all, you've homed in on that gaffe with that very selective bit of video. But you could do exactly the same with Liz Truss over that nonsense about paying people less if they worked in different parts of the country. And she showed, when she just leapt at that and hadn't really thought it through and hadn't analysed it, she showed a side to her that I now want to see examined. And there won't be any chance to examine it if we simply pack up the leadership race tomorrow. That's the first thing. The second thing is this. Let's suppose Rishi did concede and Liz got in, and then we start to get a whole series of problems. People will always say, we should have had the leadership through. We might have actually seen some of this if we did. Thirdly, of course, there are people in some parts of the country who've already had a chance to see and hear the leadership candidates live in their area, and other parts of the country that haven't. They will feel pretty aggrieved. Now, as you know, I always said we should never have had a leadership election. One of the main reasons I wanted Boris to stay was that this is, as you rightly said, this is a very bad time to have, if I can put it that way, turmoil at the top, which is what we've got.
Yeah.
But nevertheless, I think the potential for future problems, if you don't now see this through, could be much greater than we think. Now, as you know, I've been a very big Truss supporter. But then I started to have severe doubts when Rishi started talking about laws to guarantee freedom of speech and Liz started talking about criminalising wolf whistling. And I suddenly thought, hang on, they're going in different directions. And actually on that one, I would be travelling with Rishi. So I also want the chance now to see this through and to question further. And to get a better idea of whether my first instinct, which was pro-Truss, is right or not.
However, Anne Widdecombe, can the country wait another 4 weeks, given the challenging economic circumstances that we now face?
Well, the fact is that if they were close and it was neck and neck, we'd have to wait another 4 weeks, that we are expecting to wait another 4 weeks. And quite honestly, 4 weeks. We do have a government. You may have forgotten that, but just because we don't have the new PM, we've still got a government.
They're all on holiday. Boris is on holiday.
Well, that's got nothing to do with the leadership election. Your question is, should we just throw in the towel with the leadership election here and now? And I'm saying to you that I think on balance, the argument is against doing that.
Well, of course, I've got the highest regard for what Anne Widdecombe has to say on this, but Tom Bower, I think it would be quite a redemptive moment for Rishi Sunak if he stepped aside. I think that history would judge him kindly, and I think it would guarantee him a juicy, big job in this new cabinet.
Well, I disagree with you, Mark. I'm siding with Anne on this, because I think we're not picking just the new Prime Minister. We're picking the man or woman who's going to lead the Tory party into the next election. And I think that Rishi, who has not done very well in this campaign because he's not a seasoned politician and hasn't actually gone through the process of understanding gutter politics and all the rest of it, as has Liz, has learnt a lot in this campaign and has more to learn. But what I want to see is more of the hustings. I want to see a clash between the two so that we actually know that the person we choose is actually going to be able to take on Keir Starmer and win. And therefore, I think it's very good for Liz to be challenged all the time, for the holes in her argument to be exposed. And when she retreats, as she did about this levelling up wages, just see how she copes the next time she makes a mistake. So 4 weeks is nothing in terms of how long we've got to wait if Labour wins the next election. And I think it's much better to let this election, this hustings, do the cause. 4 weeks, we can wait.
However, Godfrey Bloom, the Tory party are happy to navel gaze whilst Rome burns. My viewers, real people, are going through financial hell at the moment, and all the Tories want to do is have a soap opera, and I think we should conclude that soap opera and install a new Prime Minister as a matter of urgency.
I'd be a lot happier if I'd heard some radical thought on the economy, which is point one. I haven't heard anybody for years and years and years suggest that we should cut government spending. I'm a big believer in cutting taxation, but unless we cut government spending, we're not going to be able to do that and balance the books. And it would be very straightforward to do. We spend £200 billion a year on quangos. We give £1 billion a month away in basically unaudited foreign aid. We've just given £3 billion to the Ukraine, which has nothing whatsoever to do with us. The procurement policies in the NHS are absolutely ghastly. It's politicised, and half the staff in the NHS aren't medically trained at all. So we waste fortunes in the NHS and all these other things. We could actually halve spending without sacking a single cop or nurse or doctor or surgeon. We could do that with some radical thinking, and then we could seriously cut tax and then cut regulation. And if I may just add one extra point, it is my belief that the Dover invasion of illegal immigrants is Anglo-French policy. We send the RNLI boats, we send the Border Patrol boats to mid-channel and bring them in thousands a week. Don't tell me that we can't do anything about it. How absurd. Admiral Bacon kept the Germans out in the Great War. Bert Ramsay kept the Germans out of the Channel in the Second War. To suggest we couldn't stop this by Monday, if you put me in charge, I could fix it by Monday morning with a new Dover patrol under a good admiral. The whole thing's bloody ridiculous and very, very annoying.
Prime Minister Godfrey Bloom, it's got a good ring to it, sir, and I'm sure that many of my viewers are cheering to what you've just said. But going back to your suggestion about cutting spending, cutting waste, if you go for austerity 2.0, that will impact economic growth, and we're already in recession.
No, that's absolute nonsense. You've got to understand that there are two sorts of people in the country, wealth creators and wealth consumers. Everybody in the public sector, basically, and there's 6.6 million of them, and there's 44,000 of them new civil servants in just the last 2 years. They suck out of the economy, they don't put in. We need more people in the wealth-creating sector, and we must understand that. We don't understand that. It isn't getting rid of something like 1,000 quangos and 200 billion a year isn't austerity. At the moment, we can't afford all of these blasted people. There's thousands and thousands. We have something like 50 times more civil servants now than when we had the whole empire and the whole world was painted red. The whole thing is absurd. We have to get rid. And another thing, this is going to make me unpopular with some, we cannot afford index-linked pensions in the civil service. It's costing something like £800 billion a year. It's got to stop. We are squandering money. We have to stop squandering money, get rid of regulations, and support small business with the drivers of all economies globally, small businesses.
Well, those are radical thoughts, Tom Bower, that we're not hearing from either of the candidates, as Godfrey rightly points out there. Can I ask you, Tom Bower, you've spent a long, long time immersed in the life and career of Boris Johnson. who was an election-winning machine, deeply charismatic. Your book is called The Gambler. You said that more often than not, when he rolls the dice, he wins. Are either of these candidates up to his level? I mean, are we looking at a rather disappointing two options for PM in both Truss and Sunak?
Well, that I would agree with you. I think they're both deeply flawed and very disappointing. I'm very disappointed by Boris. I think that he has betrayed the trust of all those who looked to him to actually rejuvenate Britain, set a narrative that would win another election easily in 2024 and rebuild the country magnificently. And he let us all down. There's various reasons for that. I think his marriage didn't help. I think COVID was bad. But in the end, his character was flawed. And it pains me to say it, that his critics have proven to be right. And it was a tragedy that he behaved in the way he did. I cannot understand why he lied about Chapman, about Chris Pincher. I can't understand why he behaved altogether in that way. But the truth is, he was the man who could have rebuilt Britain after Brexit failed. And for that, there'll be a lot of people who trusted him and put a lot of work behind him who won't forgive him for that. But where we are, we have got, as you rightly say, two flawed candidates. Which of the two is better is hard, because all I want is a candidate who can beat Keir Starmer. And at the moment, I'm not sure that either of them can. And I think we need to hear more from them in the next 4 weeks. We need more challenging debates and more challenging questions to see who is actually more flawed than the other, rather than who is better than the other. And so, my dear, I think you're absolutely right to be impatient with it all. But I think the country's off on holidays, and we should now seek to see whether the Kay Burleys and all the other interviewers can find the holes in the two candidates' arguments, which Keir Starmer will be looking for in 2024.
And I would suggest, and I have suggested, it's in the national interest to get a Prime Minister in number 10, a new Prime Minister, as quickly as possible. I know you beg to differ, but it's also perhaps in the interests of the Conservative Party, because at the moment, these two candidates are tearing shreds out of each other. And you've got very embarrassing videos like the one in which Rishi Sunak there earlier this week proudly said he's diverting funds from poor metropolitan areas into the suburbs. It's not a good look for the Tories. And you've got 4 more weeks of this infighting.
Indeed, it's not a good look. And those of us who can remember such days would dearly love to go back, to when these things were settled discreetly at Westminster, rather than debated across television and throughout the country and all the rest of it. And indeed, it was a much quicker process as well, of course, and didn't drag out like this. So, no, it's not good for the Tory party. But what would be even worse for the Tory party would be for them to say afterwards, we weren't given a choice. We would actually have wanted to have voted for Rishi. We've got Liz. We didn't actually make that choice. And don't forget, there is still a sizable section of the party that wants to make that choice now. Whereas if you have an election and there is a clear democratic result, that's closure. That's it. That is the choice. But you see, I think Godfrey is so right when he says that we need to be asking these questions. And for that, as Tom has pointed out, you do need the time to ask them. And that should be what is going on. By the way, I have to say, Tom, that's a magnificent book on Meghan Markle, and I blame you entirely. I stayed up reading it till 4 o'clock, and I was dead the next day.
Yes, it's even more shocking when you read the excruciating detail of how that woman's mind works and how she behaves. Highly recommended. And the Conservative Party, the most successful political party in the history of Western democracy, the party of Winston Churchill and Margaret Hilda Thatcher, can't they do better than Liz Truss and Rishi Sunak?
The party is unrecognisable. I don't recognise this as even the party of Thatcher, never mind Churchill, never mind going back into history. It's for all sorts of reasons. I think you've got an awful lot of second-rate people in Parliament. Now, I don't think that Liz and Rishi are second-rate parliamentarians. But nor do I think that they stand out at the moment as, the sort of people that we will be talking about to grandchildren in 30 years' time or whatever it might be. No, I mean, I think you're absolutely right about the party. I think the standard of parliamentarian is poor. I think a lot of that has been this wretched quota business. You know, Labour Party had all women shortlists. We had the A list. You're trying to manipulate a parliament that is not based on raw merit and raw electioneering and appealing to the electorate, but it's based instead on identity politics. You know, we must have women. We must have people who are gay. We must have people who are racially different. We must have this. We must have that. And that militates against merit. And the parliament that I joined in 1987 was a vastly more serious body than this one has ever been.
Predictions at this stage, Anne Widdecombe, how do you think it will play out? Who will be our next Prime Minister on the 5th of September 2022?
Well, unless something really massive happens, I mean, I think it almost certainly will be Liz Truss, according to all the polls. And I think it probably will be. But as I say, I want time, if you like, for things to go wrong. I want time for those deep questions to be asked. I want time for people to really press Liz on freedom, because Rishi has volunteered statements on freedom. She hasn't. She hasn't. And when I Googled Liz Truss and freedom, all I could find was a speech about freedom abroad in other countries, persecution of minorities in other countries. No. I want to know here, are we going to be able to say what we think without fear of losing our livelihoods under a Truss government? Now, so far, I hear nothing, but Rishi has addressed that.
Tom Bower, is this debate that's happening within the Conservative Party good or bad for the country?
I think it's good for the country because I think that any debate is healthy in a democracy. I think the polls are probably exaggerating Liz Truss's lead. I think that Rishi has a lot to improve, but he's got several weeks still to do it. I think in the Sky debate a few days ago, which he won conclusively, he could replicate that. So whereas I'm not saying that I would vote for Rishi right now, I think that we're much better off having the debate, because at the end of it will be a hard 18-month fight to rebuild the party, to focus its attention on governing the country, which has not been the Conservative government's focus in the last few months. And that can only be for the better, Mark. So hold off. Let's let a bit more democracy, let more light shine on the candidates. We'll find out the truth about them pretty soon.